Hi, I'm Jessica Osborn, and I'm here with Tanya Siggins, who is the founder of Zest Boutique Consulting and Coaching. She is who I'd call a passionate workplace culture crusader. Like, she's really somebody who knows her stuff when it comes to culture. And so before we started this interview, Tanya, you told me that a company culture can increase productivity of team members up to 21%, which is a huge amount when you think it's something as simple as culture. And I'm really interested to hear how we can, build a better team environment, whether that's working remotely or in an office, a physical office, particularly for me because my team is all remote. So, how do I really build a great culture for my team who are all in different places around the world? So let's kick into it. Welcome. Do you want to give us the 1 minute kind of background summary of, what is your business? What do you do?
Yeah, sure. So basically my business is I create content to help people, leaders and businesses who want to make positive culture change and try to make that easier and more accessible, because often it requires a lot of research and kind of pulling stuff together. So I try to take all of that hard work out for people so they can just kind of like purchase things, plug and play, and really help, just focus on embedding those changes into their business. So I do kind of boring stuff like policies and process templates, things like that, which can be very time consuming. I also do some more fun stuff, so webinars and programs and coaching, things like that as well. My background to all of that and how I guess generate all of that is I have a 15-year corporate HR career. So I've been in a variety of roles, from low-level HR admin right into like high-level strategic roles where I've been influencing cultural initiatives across large Australian businesses. And yeah, that's where I really found my niche for culture and creating positive workplace experiences for employees, particularly using things like diversity and inclusion and employee experience initiatives. And yeah, definitely found my niche and passion. So that's what I thought I would focus my business on. Bit of a crusader.
Yes, but I think it's becoming more and more, known and apparent that there's a huge difference in companies who have a really strong culture or I don't know what the words would be. You would have the words on, what is a good culture versus what isn't one. And I think that there's so many, you probably have got a never-ending stream of businesses that you could help improve the culture and things that might sound boring, like policies and procedures, that's sort of the nuts and bolts of how you implement it, because you need to have it documented somewhere as to what the company is going to do. So while that sounds boring, it's not the policy and the procedure itself, it's actually the thought and the strategy about what's going into it. So yeah, what is
definitely undermining yourself? I think that's where businesses often fall into a trap where they say one thing, but their policies and the way that they're written, or even the language that those policies and processes are using, are actually in complete opposition to the culture that they're trying to create. So they talk about being trust-based or open, but there's all these application forms involved in their processes, which it just doesn't make sense.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, and I guess flexible working might be another one where they might, everybody loves to say that they have flexible working. I'm sure that you've uncovered some differences when it comes to the policies that they might be implementing.
Yes, when they've got about 1,001 rules in their flexible work policy and all the flaming hoops you need to jump through to access it, and all of the reporting and checking in and kind of big brothering, I suppose they might do to make sure that you're being effective. It absolutely is not a true flexible culture. Yeah, so there's, I think, definitely sometimes a really big disconnect between what and you know this from a marketing perspective, what people espouse that they are and what they actually are, or what the lived experience of people within that business is, can be very, very different.
And do you find that there's, the people who you work with, there's a strong drive that they really want to have a culture, they want to have a positive culture, and are they just blind to the fact of some of the things that they're doing aren't helping to create the culture that they want? Or
yeah, I think a lot of it is those things have been in place for a very long time. So I think they've just become part of the fabric of the business. And so when they're trying to instigate cultural change, they go out with all the nice posters and maybe some merch, everyone gets a pen or a notebook or a drink bottle, and they kind of forget about all of this other stuff, which is actually the day-to-day lived experience of people in the business. The other thing I think people fall into the trap is leadership talks about a culture that they want to create, but that's not necessarily what 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 levels down the organization. That's not their lived experience in the business. And you talked about flexible working, for example. There's a lot of executives or senior people in businesses who would say, well, we do work flexibly. I get to go and play my golf game or pick my kids up or do whatever I want. But if you're in a call center, for example, and having to document even your bathroom breaks, that is absolutely not the same experience for those people. So I think it's really sometimes this disconnect between the intent and the actuality. So I think sometimes it's about understanding what culture you actually can create as opposed to what you idealistically or utopian vision want to create. Sometimes that's actually just not feasible, and so you need to rethink the plan.
That's so true, because you really need to set the vision for the reality of what the business is that you're running. And if you have got shift work or things where workers have to be on the floor and what have you, you've got to really explore, well, what does flexible working actually mean? How do you implement that's across the board for everybody? Because, like you say, that would be a huge disconnect between staff and the senior management. What are the other, is it another big mistake that comes to mind when you think about what people are currently doing that you would see very commonly in a place that has a disconnected culture?
I think the other thing probably is that culture happens by accident, when actually culture happens by design, or good culture happens by design, generally speaking. I think a lot of business leaders and even some HR leaders think that culture is the way that we do things here. Like, you hear that a lot. But essentially that's kind of leaving it to chance, when really it should be a strategic function of your business, particularly because really your culture drives so much within your business. So for example, if you have a customer or client focused business, it's absolutely your culture that your clients and your customers are interacting with, and people don't often think about that. I saw a great quote, and I do love it, around it's actually not customer first, it should always be employee first, because if you treat your employees well, they will in turn treat your customers well. Like, you don't have to focus so much on that because it will be a natural delivery. And I think, you will have had the experience like I have. You call a call center and you can absolutely tell the difference between one that has a great culture and one where they're just like on the clock, punching stuff out. The way they answer the phone and the way that they go out of their way to help you with an inquiry, or to go that little bit further beyond than what you've asked for. Even that kind of example can show you the importance of culture. So I think definitely organizations that are like, well, it will just manifest itself magically through things that we do or say, when really you do need to have a plan around, well, what are the key behaviors that we're wanting to see within our business? What does that look like? What is the experience that we're wanting our customers or clients to have? And what do we need to provide to our employees or our teams to ensure that transition or that osmosis process is happening? And you do need to be very strategic. There needs to be a budget. How are we going to invest in this? Who's leading this? Who are our key stakeholders? Where are our influencers? What storytelling are we going to get involved in? What does our workplace need to be like? So if you want to talk about this collaborative open door culture creating, but everyone's got like this little grey cubicle, that doesn't work. Like, where are your collaborative spaces? That doesn't make sense. You need sort of the communal tables and the flow spaces where people can kind of mix and mingle. So how are you investing in your infrastructure? So all of those questions become questions of culture.
Yeah, exactly. The office layout and actually how you're working, and even I guess if you're working online, how you are helping people collaborate just has such a big impact on culture as well. Yeah, I was just thinking when you're talking of, a company that I work for, and, they thought culture is really important. So they would go, we'll have Friday drinks would be a thing that would happen each week, which was their idea of, yay, we'll create this great culture. But at the same time, everyone was like always on eggshells because they thought their job might suddenly be, vaporized because someone, the leader kind of was a bit of a, what do you call it, highly action taking, like knee-jerk reaction. And so does that create a good culture? I don't think so. I think it was pretty toxic because everyone was so concerned about the security of their job the whole time, but then you're supposed to play happy families and have Friday drinks once a week. I was like, totally not the band-aid to solve that.
Absolutely. I think Friday night drinks are the absolute worst. It's my biggest pet peeve. Mostly because it's so inaccessible to so many people. So from that perspective too, is like there are a whole bunch of people that you're excluding if that is the holistic view
yes.
of culture creation. I mean, I know like you see people have drinks on their desk because they can't even clock out. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yep, done that. And then when I became pregnant and started to have a baby, suddenly, Friday night drinks wasn't really a thing that I could get involved in anymore. And suddenly it's like you're outcast because you're not taking part in it. And it's like, well, yeah, I can hang out for a little bit and say hi, which I would do, make the effort to do, but sorry, it's just not, I'm not part of that anymore. And it's amazing, isn't it? The difference that makes. Wow. So I guess looking at those are a lot of the big mistakes that people are making. What is the outcome? What can they achieve by fixing their culture and adopting, a really positive approach to a culture in the right way that actually creates a culture that is supportive and positive?
That's a huge question because there's a multitude of answers, and I've even had to take notes because I literally try to get through them all. But essentially, there's a huge body of research through academic spaces, but also through places like Deloitte, big consulting companies, Harvard Business Review, etc., that really have rigorously tested the impact of culture. I think that's the other thing. People find culture this kind of amorphous, weird thing that you can't really quantify, and it certainly is difficult to do that, but thankfully there's plenty of organizations that have. Great. But some of the key things that having a great culture can really drive is, as we chatted about, that customer client service. So the happier and more engaged your employees are, the more likely you are to have a positive customer or client experience, which then leads to things like word of mouth referrals, repeat business, which is, as you all know from a marketing perspective, gold dust, because it's really the stuff you can't pay for. You can't buy that kind of experience. Also greater innovation and creativity. There's a lot of research that shows businesses with good, positive, engaged workplace cultures have a lot of greater innovation and creativity in terms of the way that services are delivered or products are created. And they're more likely to be able to try and fail because it's a safer, more secure culture where you have implicit trust, but also a lack of a blame culture where people fear trying new or trying something different. So that's a huge, especially in this space, if you're in a really particularly competitive space, that can be a huge benefit. As we talked about, greater collaboration and cooperation, because your people have permission to kind of connect across businesses, or there's ways and means of that happening, whether that's physically in the workspace or, as you mentioned as well, through a technology platform. But people have that permission to just kind of go and sit in an open door session on Teams and just kind of connect. There's no real agenda or outcome required. The other thing is around better physical and mental health. There's a lot of research into the physical benefits, so reduced stress, reduced heart conditions, all sorts of different things. The other thing that's linked to that is better safety outcomes. So if you're working in an environment where safety is critical, in terms of like manufacturing and all those sorts of spaces where it is quite high risk, having a great culture actually reduces the incidence of events. It improves compliance with OH&S requirements. It also dramatically decreases your workers' compensation injury rates as well, which is a huge impact.
Yeah.
Better retention of employees. Employees are expensive. When you
Yeah.
hire them and train them and invest in them, you really do want to be keeping them. So the increased retention and keeping people on board is really critical. And greater productivity. So people who are happier and more engaged work harder, or not even harder, smarter. And certainly not to work to rule, where people feel so henpecked that they're like, okay, well, I will do this much, which is as much as I need to do to not get fired, but I'm not going to do any more. People are willing to go that extra mile willingly for your business, which makes a huge difference. So all of those things, in addition, really lead to greater profitability in a business. So ultimately, you will make more money. And in some instances, some companies report for every dollar they spend on engagement activities or cultural activities, they're receiving free back in return, which is an excellent return on investment. So it can be a very worthwhile exercise.
Yeah. And do you think that these, cultural changes are possible no matter who you have? Obviously, I guess a good team environment and team, like diversity, but also connection is important for people to feel like they're in a place where they're getting on with the people that they work with, which is great. Do you think that this is possible for any company? Is it about the people as well, or can you invest in these sort of initiatives and create a culture no matter who is working at the business? It was just something that's popped up for me.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to throw a curly question at you.
Good question. I think one of the requirements would be that you have to have a leadership group, so people who are driving and making decisions around the stuff and who are leading the change from the top. You have to have a group who are invested and willing to do that. I think if you are a lone soldier and there are a multitude of naysayers around you, it can be a very, very difficult task. And honestly, leadership can absolutely scupper things from the get-go, because if they're not acting in a way that's consistent and really driving that change from the front, it's almost impossible to shift. So the first thing I say is you have to have leadership, or the majority of leadership, who are committed to change.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you can, even if your employee group and even if your employee engagement scores, or even just your gut feel when you walk in is that this is a great place to be. Absolutely, it's a tough place to start, but you definitely can start. I think one of the things you need to think about is you can start it, but you also need to be prepared that sometimes significant cultural change does require a changing of the guard as well. And what happens, and you'll see this in a lot of businesses, is you get a new CEO in, or a new leadership team, or they're acquired by a new business, and the minute the culture starts to change, you always get this wrapped off the sinking ship, like people just start sort of scurrying, or key leaders leave and people follow them, because for some people they maybe liked how it was, or that might have worked well for them financially, or from a status perspective. Particularly if we're talking about things like trust-based cultures, inclusive leadership, flexible working, there are some people who just really struggle with making that mindset shift. And if that's an expectation that's placed upon them, it is sometimes better that they do move on and find an organisation that better fits with their approach, or that you are recruiting people in who better fit the culture that you're trying to create. So absolutely, I can say you can start it, providing you've really got that push from leadership to start making those changes. But do be prepared that there is often some collateral damage. Like, not everyone is going to be happy with some of the changes, because it can be confronting.
Yeah, that's that quote that comes to mind. All change is messy in the middle, but in the end it's so beautiful. And I think it's like, anytime you're doing change, you've got to be prepared for it to be messy and a bit ugly, and a little bit of the hard grind just while it's happening. But if the vision of what it is, the outcome we're going for is clear, then getting through that change to the end is worth it.
Absolutely. And that's where it comes down to that strategy too, of having a clarity around what you're trying to shift and how you can possibly measure that, so that you can even though it may feel really messy because you've got your exit rates have gone crazy, or people are really discombobulated because all these changes happening around them.
Yeah.
You can still steady the course because you know what ultimately you're trying to achieve, and that you're measuring your progress towards that. So, our clients, yes, it feels awkward, but our client complaints have dropped 20% from where they were a year ago. Like, that's amazing. Let's stick with this.
Yes.
You've got to be able to find those good news stories to tell, to kind of keep people on the level, or to stop the panic and knee-jerk reaction of, oh, we've lost 20% of our staff, let's stop, this is madness. But then if you can start to look at some of those other metrics that show that the change is having that positive change that you were hoping to see in other areas, perhaps bullying complaints have gone down, perhaps there's some kind of client metrics that have improved in terms of word of mouth referrals, or return sales, or whatever that might look like. Safety might have improved. You have to look and go, oh, actually it's worth that cost.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And you can't expect the change to, it's not just going to happen overnight. It's not going to be an instant, wave a magic wand and bang, it's done. It is literally a transformation that you have to go through. So yeah, amazing. Loving this conversation. There's so much really, really good, great stuff that you're sharing with us. So for people listening who are thinking, okay, this is all sounding really good, that's a lot of info for me to take on. Do you have any, quick tips that you're like, okay, if you're starting to think about this, this is what you might need to do. Here's a way to get started, just something really simple.
Yep, I do have 5 basic building blocks for culture.
Okay.
We try to, it is a big, messy kind of conversation, but I do try to have a succinct version. The first would be to invest in it. So investing in your culture change. So I know, having been a consultant and having worked in HR roles, so many times you're briefed and it's like, well, we really love this Rolls Royce product, but we really love it at this Ford Focus budget. And you're like, disconnect. So like anything, if you want a good quality product, you're wanting to engage in creating a good culture within your organization, you are going to have to invest in it. And that includes time, money, and energy. So be prepared for that, understand what you're willing to invest in, and then start to have those conversations about what can that translate into. The second point I'd have is make sure that you're demonstrating it. So whatever culture you're trying to create, you need to have your leadership on board and leading from the front and demonstrating it. There's absolutely no point having expectations for employees to behave in a certain way and then having your leadership group like to use that term because often there's a lot of senior people in a business who are not leaders at all, but you can't have one rule for them and one rule for everybody else.
Absolutely.
So you need to be consistent and have people who are leading that from the front. It is not enough to slap up a few posters of this is our culture, these are our values, and walk away. You really need to be making sure that people are living, breathing, and demonstrating that.
Yeah.
The other thing is tailor it. The other trap I see organizations, particularly larger organizations, fall into is they want to create something that's all things for all people. And the challenge with that in particularly complex businesses is it's really difficult to do that. So I've previously worked in organizations that are very geographically dispersed, for example. So wanting to have a health and wellbeing initiative is really challenging. So they had gym memberships, which is fabulous if you're in one of the 3 CBD offices, and shit if you live in Cairns or Wagga or Shepparton or Adelaide where they're going to service. And so suddenly they were trying to come up with an appropriate solution for those places that couldn't have access. There was this impression of like disproportionality between, the city people were getting more than we were. Actually ended up causing a culture conundrum rather than particularly great initiatives. So as much as possible, come up with basic principles or basic objectives, but then enable and empower teams or locations to determine what that looks like and feels like for them, for example. So in that example, provide a health and wellbeing budget to each of those locations. And if they want to do a weekly boot camp, they do a weekly boot camp. If they want to subsidize gym memberships, they can do that. Like, enable people to tailor it so that it's meaningful across your business.
Yeah.
And that does include diversity too. So we talked about photo night groups.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, that's not accessible for a whole range of people for a whole different range of reasons. So making sure that the reach of whatever you create is as broad as it can be. The third is to communicate it. So obviously talk about it. And it needs to be verbally and non-verbally. So we talked about things like your processes and procedures and making sure that they're aligned, your workplace, things like your marketing collateral. Like if you want to have a culture based around diversity and inclusion within your business, but everyone on your marketing collateral is white, it doesn't make sense. So you do need to think about lots of different facets of your business and making sure that they are all communicating a consistent message. And also your verbal storytelling as well. So reward and recognition, how you highlight people who really embody your culture and values, getting leaders to talk about their experience of culture and values, and making sure that people can tell a good story about it, other than a really boring PowerPoint presentation, for example. The final thing is to ask about it. Culture is not set and forget. It's not something that you do as a discrete project and you're like, well, that implementation's done, walk away.
Yeah.
Culture is a living, breathing thing. It constantly requires attention. It's like you have to check in on it and feed it and change it and do all these bits and pieces for it. And one of the key things that I see organizations fail to do is ask. And like everything, feedback is really confronting. It's confronting for people to ask about as a person. It's also sometimes confronting for businesses to say, so how are we doing? Because they think they're going to get this onslaught of negative commentary from their employees, which they may well do, but you're better off having that and then being able to take action on it than not asking and letting it fester. So things like surveys, there's tons of free or low-cost survey options out there, or like high-end sophisticated products if that's for you. But even things like focus groups or the old suggestion box, like anonymous suggestion box, like use those kinds of channels to check in and see how well that culture is living and breathing and what the experience of employees are within your business.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, just not being afraid of judgment, not being afraid of criticism, because I think everyone's so precious. Everyone feels like we don't want to be judged, but everybody judges. Every human does it. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, whatever, you look at someone, you're making subconscious judgments about them, whether they're good or bad, or whether you like something or don't like something. It's just part of human nature. And I think, we just need to sometimes actually grow up a bit and go, hey, look, judgment happens no matter what. Let's not try to stop it, or let's not fight against it. Let's actually just be, it's fine. Yeah. Let's listen to it. Let's not get emotive. Let's not have that response. Let's see what we can learn and gain from it and move forward. And, I think the same thing happens in business, when we are business owners. And, this is probably one of the biggest things that I see, a sales issue, where people think, oh, I don't like sales, or I'm afraid of selling, but it's actually probably boils down to a fear of judgment and criticism and the fear of rejection. But we kind of,
no, I don't like that. And that feeling like, no, I don't like you. And it's the exact same, I would say, for leaders in a business where, there is this fear of employees and team members turning around and saying, you know what, no, I'm not happy. No, this isn't working for us.
And they're kind of like, but I've put so much effort into this. I want to be told I've done a good job. And we want that praise. It's like we're all going back to, we can break it down and relate it to children and how they are. Adults are still a lot the same. And it's quite interesting. It's just that we hide it a bit better sometimes.
Yeah, we're simply conditioned. For better or for worse.
So do you have a quick tip? I know we've talked a lot about big organizations, have big diverse teams and are geographically spread and actual workplaces. Some of the people listening to this may have a small business where, they've got a very small team. It might be them and a handful of people or even external people who are working for them that aren't even their direct staff. Do you think a culture is still important for them in those instances? And, what would you say if you had one bit of advice for a small business owner when they're thinking about culture, what they should be what's the first thing they should really think about?
Yeah, it's a good question, because obviously the impact of culture is different when you are trying to get 1,000 or 10,000 people to behave in a way that is consistent and on brand, I suppose, as opposed to if it's yourself and 2 or 3 other people. But I would still definitely think about, it probably relates almost more to like your personal branding or your small business branding, is how do you want to be perceived in the market by people who interact with your people, whether that's a direct employee, whether that's a subcontractor or a virtual assistant, whatever that means, and make sure that you're very clear and consistent around the expectations that you have. So if you want to be incredibly professional and quite formal, then you need to explain that quite clearly. So understand what the basic framework that you're wanting to create or what you're wanting to reflect is, and make sure that you communicate that clearly. So that would be things like, we go back to things like policies and procedures, like the way that you structure guides or documents for your team members to work from, the way that your communications with them happen. Like if you're like, hey, and kiss at the end of the email, but you're trying to create this kind of more formal, more professional culture, that doesn't align. So I think it's really understanding about how you want that business to look and how you want that to be perceived, getting clear on what's going to drive that perception, what behaviors are required by yourself and also the people around you, and then talk about that, and then align your activities to that as well. The way that you engage with them, it might be the way that you reward and recognize them, like all those sorts of things. You can structure around those key building.
I really like that, because I think that really breaks it down simply. Maybe because I'm a marketing person, I was like, yes, exactly, the brand guidelines. But it might be that point where you've got to where you've got, and it's all being kind of in your head, and you find it's being and showing your values when it's you. But when you're starting to bring on other people and they're acting on your behalf or engaging externally, or even with yourself, I think for them all to work cohesively together with you, probably having taking the time to go and do your proper brand strategy. So not just what your brand looks like, but what are the values, what are the personalities, what is the expectation, what is even the tone of voice, especially if they're going to be writing for your business and for customers. What is important, what's important for your business, and how do you want to be perceived in the market? And that's, that to me is, these are the key parts of your brand strategy document. So it doesn't have to be that hard. It could be literally your first step, just get your brand strategy worksheet done. I've got a brand strategy worksheet people can download off my website for free. It's got all this in it. So it's like, hey, there you go. You can actually do that yourself, get started. And that then becomes, the beginning of it. It's like, this is how we want to operate and be for the market.
I think, like we touched on before, one of the big mistakes people make is that this happens by accident. And I think that's really easy to assume when you're in a very small business, because you think, well, there's only 5 of us, like surely this is clear enough. And in some cases it is, because you're often in control of recruiting those people, so you tend to pick people who are aligned, which is helpful. But I do think if you're unclear or you are inconsistent, then you, by virtue, are creating a bit of a muddy culture. And normally we find a lot of the businesses that I've worked with, or even businesses that I've worked within, probably that 30 to 50 people threshold is where people go, oh yeah, okay, this just got hard. That really seems to be that transition point where it's quite easy, because people are taking their lead from you personally to having such a team around you, or divesting leadership responsibility to a point where suddenly you're needing other people to be your mouthpiece. Or convey those expectations. So I think the earlier you can get that clear, the easier it is as you continue to grow your business over time.
Yeah, definitely. The communication. And like you say, it's so easy to do at the beginning. So if you are starting and, you're in that growing phase, getting this in place sooner rather than later just helps you in the future. It's a scene. Yeah, fantastic. So tell us about your business in particular. So Zest, what did you do in the launch of your business, and how did you get that word out initially that you existed?
Yeah, good question. I think the first thing I did was Google how to start a small business. I went through the checklist that I found, thinking, okay, well, this will work. And I think we had that conversation very early on in our business jam journey, where I said, you kind of expect you do everything that the Google tells you to do, and you're still sitting there going, oh, that didn't quite land where I thought it would. So I definitely did the things of creating a logo, building a website, getting some branding photos taken, all of those sorts of things. But I think really, once I ticked all those boxes and really had to find a way of connecting, probably the biggest thing was socials, and particularly for me, given the work that I do, LinkedIn from a professional sphere. So it was very much around establishing who I was, how I wanted to present, and also what I did. And I feel like LinkedIn was definitely, for me, still is probably the key avenue that I use to do that. But I think all of the other infrastructure I built around was helpful.
Yeah.
Even though I had to go back and edit everything more than I kind of expected. So I certainly don't think, it was wasted energy, but I certainly what I learned pretty quickly was they are great side products to have and refer to, but really have to find the right kind of channel to get my name out there. The other thing I did was message everyone I know, just hey, this has happened. I have built a lot of great relationships over the years. I've had lots of great feedback from employees that I've worked with who have now moved into leadership positions, managers who I've worked with who have rated me as a HR expert, that, they've trusted that relationship. So just getting the kind of word out there from people who knew me, who can advocate for me, in some of those conversations, it's a long-term game, but found, even now, a year on from creating the business, that people have heard of me through people that I've previously worked with. So I think being open and honest and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. As hell. But if you get the chance to drop my name in a room, it would be super amazing if you did. And it feels so awkward. That kind of putting you
but if people don't know about it, then no one knows about it. It is honestly it sounds really simple, as in just let people know that you exist.
People will Google you.
It's actually that they file that little bit away. Okay, now I've got that. They've stored it away. They might not need it right now, but when they do need it, that's when you want to be drawing that out. And that's why, I say to people so often, with social media, for instance, they're like, oh, I'm just doing all this work on there and nothing's happening. I'm like, no, every time you are posting, people are seeing it. It's another repetition that you exist, of what you do. And all that information is getting stored in there. And when they have a need, who do you think they're going to think of first? They're going to think of the person that they've been seeing consistently and that is popping straight to mind.
That person I see on LinkedIn bang on about this all the time.
That's it. Yeah. You want to be that one that they instantly go, I know, I've seen someone, I know who it is, and bang, I'm going to go and talk to them first. Yeah, but let's not be modest about it, because I think that you had actually a really great result with your LinkedIn. This hasn't even been, you're saying it's been a year since you first started. It's less than a year since you joined Business Jam, but you've had, what did you have, how many followers before you began the business, and how many do you have now?
Yeah, I probably started with about 300 maybe. I think it was very much the corporate, added people when I met them at a networking event and then never engaged them again. And I think I've got over 2,000 now.
Wow, amazing.
You see people, I don't know why they always put up the celebratory, I've got 30,000 connections posts on LinkedIn, which I don't quite understand. That is not my objective. So I think compared to other people's followers, my result is fairly modest. But I think what I really pride myself on is that I actually make a deliberate intent to connect with everybody that I connect with personally. So I send everybody that I connect with a personal message saying thank you for their connection or reaching out personally to them. So I think that's probably, like, I think you can have 30,000 followers, but can be quite
yeah. But what does it mean? Like 30,000 followers who you don't know, who don't know you, quality over quantity any day. And I think that's really great. So a really great tip there for LinkedIn. Tanya is obviously very successful on that platform, but it is making that little bit of extra effort to reach out. And, you know, if you're making the effort to connect with someone, or you're accepting their connection, to actually start up a conversation with them. So do you get connection requests that you don't accept?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you connect with people who you feel
I
are
literally
beneficial.
set time in my calendar to manage my LinkedIn connections. It's a very deliberate thing for me. And I go and make sure that they're not bots. I go and make sure, like, I just check to see if they're like particularly engaged. So I look at their post history to see if they're posting, making comments on people's stuff. Like, if they're just there passively posting up about crypto, then
veto.
No. So yeah, it's a deliberate thing for me. Like, I can definitely go through and have a look. The other thing, I am a big advocate of diversity, inclusion, and belonging, but I'm also have pretty much zero tolerance for bullshit. And so often I will look and make sure I'm happy to work with people and help educate them with my content. What I'm not up for is trolling and nonsense. So the other thing I would generally check is, you know, like, if they're posting racist stuff or things that just don't sit well with me personally, it's not a conversation I would want to engage in. And it's not a perspective I would value as adding value to the conversations that happen on my content. Then that would be the other thing that I'd rule it out. Like, if I saw misogynistic comments, you know, anything not inclusive, that's the other thing, because I just don't have time.
Yeah, amazing. And you can really see the results, because, you know, when you post, your audience is really engaged with what you're sharing, what you're posting. You get lots of comments, there's a good conversation going on. So you can tell that you have built a really good network there by being careful about who it is who you are connecting with. And I have to say that I think reject more people than who I accept with connections. There are all sorts of random ones that you get, and I always think, why do you want to connect with them?
And you're hi, Jessica Osborn, marketing coach, and you're like,
yeah,
do you?
Yeah. It's a little bit rife, I think, and but that's excellent, amazing result, really, in a short space of time. I mean, that's huge, especially because you're actually vetting everybody individually as well. That is a huge amount of growth. So well done, really big congratulations on it. So you joined Business Jam not a year ago. It was in winter, about July, I think, last year, when we opened the doors, and you actually joined the very final moments of enrolment. It was
11:59. Yeah,
11:59, the last minute before the midnight deadline. I probably would have let you come in if you'd been a minute or two late. But yes, July last year, so 2020. How would you describe yourself and, I guess, your approach to your business back then? Because it was still very new for you.
It's probably 5 months in at that point. I think probably overwhelmed and unsure are probably the two words that sum it up. Mostly, I think what I struggled with a transition from a corporate role into entrepreneurship was I was always felt very expert in what I did and my knowledge base when I was in a corporate role. Like, I am a HR expert and always prided myself on, knowing what to say and do in situations. And then you walk into this world and you're like, I have no idea what to do, where to start, who to ask. I'm not a marketing expert. I'm not a finance guru. I don't know what tech platforms are out there. So it's like literally you're stepping into this completely different world.
Huge learning curve.
None of which are my strong suit. And so, that process was very overwhelming. And for someone who is very achievement oriented and slightly perfectionistic, that was a real struggle, because I always had confidence in knowing what to do. And suddenly I was in this space where I had no bloody idea what I was doing. So that's definitely where I was when I joined.
And I think this is something, I see a lot. And obviously I came from a corporate environment as well into business, and you go from the top, you go from this place where you build up this career, you build all this experience, you know what you're doing, do it with your eyes shut, you've got a lot of confidence, and suddenly when you're starting your business, you're back to zero. You're literally like starting at the bottom. And looking back, obviously it's always great with hindsight. I'm like, why did I feel like that when obviously I'm not starting at zero? I'm bringing all of this amazing experience and knowledge and skills with me. I've got all this credential. Yes, my business is new, but I am not new. I know what I'm doing. But we tend to kind of feel like we're a newbie, or we apply these identities to ourselves where we're right back at the beginning, when actually it's not. All we're doing that's new is creating a new way to work, a new way to get paid, because we're not being paid by an employer, we're paying ourselves and we're working with a client. So that's the new bit. And yes, there's a lot of learning that comes with how do you do that, and tech platforms and everything. But I would say, if you were then speaking to someone who's coming out of a corporate role now and they're starting a business, what would you tell them is the most important thing to focus on first? And what would you say, don't even worry about that yet?
That's a good question. I definitely think getting clear on what you're wanting to do, like the actual service. And I know you talk through in Business Gen, there's a lot of focus on finding your niche and not trying to be all things to all people. So I think that's a really important step, because I think when you do start out, you want to attract as much business as possible. So you think spreading yourself really thin is going to make that happen. And I know you've got a lot of content in your course around that's actually not the case at all. And actually you need to be the right person for one person, really. Like that's more beneficial than trying to be all things to all people. So I think that's definitely a really key step. I think possibly my situation's a little bit different in that I didn't deliberately leave a corporate role to start a small business because I had this germination of an idea, or this like burning passion inside of me that was waking me up at 3 a.m. My circumstances were a little bit different in that I was made redundant from my corporate role, knew that it was going to be a real challenge to get back into the corporate space because I had just had a baby and didn't want to work full time. So for me, going into consulting really was kind of like a plan B of, well, I'll just do this until I find a real job. So I think my motivation is different. I think sometimes perhaps some people who are making a very deliberate choice have a lot more clarity around that, because it's something they've been playing around in their head for years in a way that I hadn't. I do think like definitely getting clear on that was critical. So if you, I guess sitting there thinking, oh, do I throw it all in and move that direction, the first thing I'd say is make sure that you're very clear about exactly what you're wanting to do, and who you're trying to service, because I think that's probably one key thing to get in. A business is not a quick fix solution. You are probably better off just going and getting any old job if it's about that. I 100% agree with you. And I think, something that just came up as you're talking then was, the fact that this was just, I'm just going to do this for now until I get a job. So your identity and your commitment and what you were seeing as you was very much as still the employee and the job. And the business was not you didn't embody it. You didn't go, this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be. And I think that even like I would look back now and say, even myself, I've always wanted to run my own business. It took me a long time to actually have the courage to do it. But even though I did have the courage to do it, I think I was still holding onto the security blanket
especially in the beginning, of being like, well, I'll see if it works, and if it doesn't, I'm just, I can go back to the job. And I even hadn't, I hadn't resigned from the job yet. It was still there. I still had that kind of, I was still holding on to the life raft.
Yeah.
I hadn't decided I'm going to swim to the island. I'm just doing it. I'm going, and I hadn't let go. And I think, that is a really key piece. And I love a way to describe it as, if the business, you decide what it is you actually really want. And to be successful in business, you really have got to decide you want to do business, and business is the thing that you want to do. Therefore, your job, if you still got it, fine, but it's a side job. It is not a side hustle. It is helping you bring in the money while you are getting your business up and running and starting. And that is fine. That's a great strategy to have, because you might not necessarily want to go all in right at the beginning.
Correct.
Fine. But you've got to change the identity of what is your main thing. And even if the business is still a tiny little thing that's not earning, you can still be the business owner that has a side job.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the biggest thing to, really embody and decide on a journey like this, because, being in business is
the mindset game is tough. Like, I think by far out of everything, and it's difficult not having an IT department to call when your laptop won't bloody work, and there's 1,000 other practical things that drive you crazy. But honestly, I think that probably the biggest game in terms of shifting is that shift in thinking. And for me, it was definitely about making not just the financial investment, but the emotional investment. Because I was always of if it doesn't work, like, it was just while I was trying to find a job. So if it all goes tits up, it doesn't really matter. Because investing in it meant investing in the failure of it too. And I think that was a really big thing to kind of get over, that kind of hurdle of like, no, I'm actually invested in this. And if it does go belly up, that will be like acknowledging that it will be sad, and acknowledging that there will be a grieving process, and that's okay. I think probably like some people are with relationships, like, if I just keep it at arm's distance, if this goes to shit, I won't care so much about it. Whereas if you do want a successful business, you can't be half-assed with it.
I love that. Go all in and be okay that, hey, something may not work, but I actually like to say nothing is a failure unless you stop. So if you keep on going, things that you try might not work the way you wanted them to. That doesn't mean that it's not working. That just means that thing didn't work. Great. Go, move on, like, fail fast, move on, try something else, keep going. It's like, we can't expect that life is going to be mistake-free, or that nothing's ever going to happen that's wrong, or no tech troubles. It's like, it's just going to be part of it. But we kind of are aware that that's going to happen, and that's a really healthy attitude to have. I love that. So how would you describe yourself now?
Probably still overwhelmed and unsure.
I think there's always more to learn, right?
But I think
we'll never stop learning.
What's changed is that acceptance of, that's just part of the game. Like, at no point am I going to get to a point where I feel like I've got this sorted. So I think it's kind of understanding, especially for someone like me who's so invested in getting things right. Is realizing I'm never going to get to that point with a business. It's always going to be, what's next? What else can I do? What else can I try? That failed. Why did it fail? How do I undo that? What am I wanting to achieve? So for me, as you know, I've had some personal circumstance changes this year where I'm now expecting a second baby. I did end up going back into a part-time corporate role as well. So I did have to rethink and re-strategize, and the business that I intended to sort of create a year ago is very different to really where I'm at now and what I'm trying to create and build. So having that level of comfort of complete and utter uncertainty, but also that ability to adapt. As things change, and being okay with that. And also acknowledging, like, for me, that financial success, and I will acknowledge flat out, I'm in a privileged position. I do now have a corporate role, which does bring in some regular income, which is very helpful. But for me, I always had the privilege of, it wasn't just financial success that really was a motivator for me either with Zest. I mean, obviously that would be lovely to get to, but I also appreciate a lot of businesses are not profitable for many years. Some of them are, and that's great. I'm not in that position, but for me, there were other benefits around building confidence, being connected back into the content, because I'd been on parental leave before I started my business, making connections, getting new perspectives. There are a whole raft of other things of value that came out of like the stuff I've learned about marketing and communications. Like that helps me in my corporate job. It's all experience I wouldn't have had otherwise. So there have been other payoffs, even though that may not necessarily be in a profit loss statement. But after reflecting and being able to reflect and go, look, at, financially maybe not the reward I was hoping for, but here's all this other amazing stuff that happened as a result of that as well.
Absolutely. And, year one, with a young baby, going back to a job, being pregnant, there's a huge amount that's still going on. And even now you're evolving your business, because now with taking on, what's been happening and seeing what what you're seeing out there, how you're imagining how you can help people, you're taking your business on another evolution. And so, it's still, there is no, it's there, there's a different vision for it in the future, which I'm really excited about, because I think this is really great progress. It's, it's really showing how much you have changed just in that short amount of time, where it was sort of like, oh, what is this thing? And now you're actually like, oh no, it's okay. I'm in control, and I'm okay that it's not, like that everything isn't all just set out and it's not perfect. I don't think anything in business is perfect. Ask any business owner, is your business perfect? They'll be like, oh my God, no. There's a million things wrong with it. But that's okay. It's just, that doesn't actually matter. It's about, it's about what you're able to do and the impact that you can make for others. So I'm keen to hear, what is your plan? So the new direction you're taking Zest in, or maybe like it's not really a new direction. I would say it's an evolution of your original business, not a pivot. But what is it that you are doing now with Zest? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I guess my focus really was around, how do I create a business that complements, soon to have a newborn and a toddler and a part-time job to juggle. And so, as you say, it's less of a complete gear change, but more of a consolidation. So what I've realized is I don't have the time to invest in getting into businesses and doing the consulting services as much. So really what I've shifted to is focusing on content creation and, starting to sell products and content. Which was always a component of the business. It's just become the key focus of rather than trying to curate a consulting client. So very much my focus now is on understanding what content I can create that adds value to my ideal client and starting to create that. But also, I guess my other thing is just like, what's the shit that I love to share and talk about, and I'll put that out there and see if people pick it up and run with it or not. So very much that was, investing in a platform that I could use to sell that properly, like getting all the financial stuff in the back end so that people can pay me and I can get the money, all those sorts of things. It was a catalyst to really kind of put that forward, and probably a little bit more, obviously the way that you would approach nurturing a relationship to try to develop into a consulting assignment is a bit different to, hey, here's this webinar I'm running, please come along for an hour. It's a different tactic. So definitely rethinking how I connect with social media. I know you've given me some feedback around, getting in there with the ask, like tell people what you need them to do, tell them to sign up for your things. I think there was like 4 exclamation points. I'm like, yes, okay.
Don't leave it up to them to find it.
So getting a little bit bolder and a little bit, ballsier with some of my content creation as well. In a little bit of an adjustment. So an exciting kind of recalibration, I suppose.
Because it's like, going from that one-to-one where it's, it's very much very intensive on you, to a digital product style business where you'll spend a bit of time creating these products, but then you can sell them to many, many people. And so while the cost per product will be smaller, and even the outcomes that you're getting for them are really going to be, you're saving someone time, because you've got this here's a map, here's a template, here's a way that you can implement this, and you kind of can teach them about the why and then sell them the how in your products, which again is actually taking it back to at the start of business day, when we sit down and design, well, how do you want your life to be? What's actually going to work for you in your life? And with these changes that you've had in your life, this is now a really smart move to make your business actually work and be supportive of your life, and that you can live the life that you still want to live, because you're going to have time that you need to spend with your baby, that you want to spend with your baby and with your toddler and family, and not, you don't want to be up all night working, my God, and then try to be dealing with kids. I think that would be an absolute disaster. So no, I love this. So tell us about, because you said you've got a few like digital products, but you've got a particular program that you have been developing. I know you were posting about some lovely fun you were having filming the videos for it. So tell us a bit about your program.
So I'm running a new program that kicks off in the end of April, so in a couple of weeks' time, which is called Birdwatching at Work. And it is really focused on helping people to improve their relationships and their communication with people. I look mostly specifically in the workplace, but absolutely the content is applicable. Like, I use some of it with my partner and friends and family. Like, so the content is very digestible and applicable. But I guess really, the remit for me is about helping people to have more effective relationships with their colleagues, the people that they're working with in the workplace. And the reason it's called birdwatching is because we actually go through and identify 4 different bird species that exist in your workplace. And we talk through, really, when you're looking through your binoculars, what you might spot and might give you a clue to which kind of species the people that you are working with are. And talk about practical tips around, okay, so if you are one type of bird species and you are going into a meeting or having to deliver feedback to someone who is a different bird type than you, how can you do that most effectively? So what do you need to deliver to things, almost like marketing, basically, of like, how do you tailor that message to your audience? So don't go in there with what you want to do, but go in there and how could that message be best received by that person? How can you tailor that engagement or that situation to be as effective as possible by adjusting your own style?
Yes. Oh, I love that. And it sounds like a really easy way to kind of understand the differences in people by having just 4 types, because I know there's so many different types of personality, what do you call them? Personality frameworks, and gosh, sometimes they can get really complicated.
Personalities and and it is based on a psychological model. It's actually based on the DISC model, which was developed by a psychologist, William Marsden. But what I really try to do is, so I've been delivering this content for over a decade now.
Wow.
Scary to think about. When I actually went and found my certificate to look at when I was qualified, I was like, oh, that's longer ago than I thought. And really what I've done through those years and years and years of delivering this is found really clever ways of delivering it in digestible, real ways. So I've had a lot of success delivering sessions like this into teams where the most junior person takes out of it just as much value as the most senior person. Like, there is no level of specific intelligence, or you don't need to be in a particular role to get value out of this. It is literally just how you work effectively and communicate effectively with the people you're engaging with day to day. And I try to do it with a little bit of fun and flair.
Make learning fun, definitely. So would you say it's for people who are really wanting to just improve their relationships with other people?
Like, it is literally applicable to everyone. As I said, I've run this session for teams of people, which include, from receptionists right up to like very senior partner level people, and all of them have walked away going, oh yeah, there was like one real clear nugget of like, oh, that's why when I go and approach such and such like that I get a blank stare, or the door slammed in my face, or, you know, my message I'm not influencing in the way that I want to influence. So absolutely. I would say particularly great for people moving into leadership positions, particularly where they're starting to manage people who may be a different style to them, and they're thinking, oh, how do I delegate work? How do I provide feedback? How do I not play favorites? That's another thing, is we tend to stick with our own flock. So you will naturally gel with certain people. And certainly what I've seen a lot of new leaders happen is they build really great connections with people who are like them, but really struggle with people who are not. And rather than investing in those relationships, they tend to just kind of cut them off. And that's where things around favoritism, sometimes even bullying and harassment can start to eke in, because people are just so uncomfortable with that relationship that they're just kind of disengaged. So it can be really helpful if you're starting to feel like, oh, I just have this person in my team and I just really struggle to find a way in. So I'd say particularly valuable for that. But as I said, like, can also be handy if you just need your husband to do the dishes. Like, what are the little tricks and communicate you can use to kind of
why are my kids like that? Oh, they're a different bed type to me.
And it can work. Certainly you can get kids profiles as well, to understand how people process information. It talks about how much risk they like or don't like.
Yes.
You know, I have a kid who's when you take him to a park, he's stuck to me because he's quite risk averse. So the way that I have to communicate with him and kind of draw him out is very different to someone who's got, I've got friends who have 3-year-olds that are just like throwing themselves in front of cars. So their engagement has to be very different. And it's very much the same with people in the workplace. So how do you provide feedback effectively, or how do you influence someone to engage in change that they're quite resistant to? You know, is it going to be a hard sell or an easy sell? Because they're just going to be like, yep, I'm there. Or they're like, no, I'm going to need to see all the academic research before we start to move on.
Because I think we all tend to think that everybody comes at it from the same place we do. Like we apply our context and our, you know, way of thinking to everybody, and you know, you sit there and go, why on earth do they think that, or why are they doing that? And I think that this is
58-slide PowerPoint presentation. How were they not convinced? You're like, you all fell asleep.
Yeah. Because it wasn't how they liked.
That's it.
That's so true, isn't it? Yeah. And, you know, so anyone who's feeling like you might be on another planet from other people at certain times, this would be great. But yes, I think for managers, having been a manager is definitely understanding different people, and some people need nurturing, other people actually just need to be let off the leash, like, you know, give them what they want to do and let them go and do it. Other people like really want to be nurtured through the process, and you've got to be able to recognize and understand that and communicate with them differently. Yeah, really great.
Your expectations, as you say, like you could have 2 team members, one who's like, okay, give me the big picture of what you want and I'll go deliver it, and someone who's asking you 1,000 questions, and not seeing one as better or worse, but actually just understanding that actually that's just the way that they work, and that's how they are effective, and that you need to, as a leader, and your aim is helping those people to succeed, is that you need to deliver different things to different people.
Fantastic. And so how are you delivering this bird watching at work? What is it?
So first up is a live 2-hour workshop where we talk through the content. So that is a little bit of insight into the model that sits behind it, but then we very much talk about, this is what this bird species like, this is how you're going to observe, these are the things that you'll hear, see and feel in the workplace when you're interacting with these people. And then we go into, if you're needing to engage with someone who is this bird style or species, how do you do that? So how do you write effectively in terms of report writing or communicating by email? What verbal approach do you need to take? What spatial approach do you need to take? What are their motivators? What do you need to get them on board? So it's literally, I've tried to keep it very simple, like a slide of content per thing. So it's just 4 key things that you'll observe and 4 key topics
Yeah.
that you need to consider in terms of your approach. So that's a 2-hour live workshop, so you can handle it with questions if you want to, part of that. What we'll also do is I've actually partnered with a friend of mine, another small business owner, Charissa from Impact Persona. So you will actually get a report, a really great basic report that would actually tell you your disc style. As I said, that's what this framework is based on. So you'll actually get a lot of personal insight into your own style in more detail than we would go into in the workshop. So that is yours to keep.
Wow.
And then you also get 3 group coaching calls. So I'll be running a live 1 hour. It should probably be longer than 1 hour. I do like to talk. Live coaching calls. I say the same for Business Jam, where we always had an hour scheduled, and 2.5 hours later we were done. We're basically helping support you taking that theory from the workshop into your working world. So there's a particular person that you're really struggling with and you try a few things and they're not maybe working as hoped, you can bring that to the group coaching. You can tap into the hive mind of other participants, but also me as a subject matter expert who's done this for a really long time, just coaching you through.
Yeah, some new strategies and what you can do. Fantastic. Excellent. So how do people learn more? So you're going to run this how often? So you said you're starting it in May?
The end of April. Yeah.
End of April.
Yeah. Baby's due August. So whether I'll sneak another one in before then, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, there's obviously a few variables in place. But look, what I'd be hoping to do is probably at least once a quarter.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. And so where can they find out more about it or check out more about you? Have you got a website?
Do have a website. You can have a look at that. That's www.zestbcc.com.au. But probably the best option, as I talked about already, is LinkedIn. So you can just search my name, Tanya Siggins, and you can find and connect with me. I do link to my other socials. So I do have Insta and Facebook as well, but I do post links to those via LinkedIn. So if you're connected with me on LinkedIn, you'll definitely be able to connect with me everywhere else that you want to, but probably share most of the content through the LinkedIn platform in terms of video content and sort of daily content that goes up. So that's probably the best place to connect.
Fantastic.
You can always PM me if you have specific questions.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really, really fun program and like a lot of value in there as well, being able to get that extra coaching from you afterwards, after trying some of your new strategies and seeing whether they work or not. So well done. Sounds really good. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. We had a really wide-ranging discussion over lots of things.
You went some places.
Yeah, we did. There's lots and lots of value in that. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being here, and it's been a real pleasure having you in Business Jam. Can't wait to see the next phase of Zest Consulting and boutique. So BCC is boutique consulting and coaching.
Well, it's just me, so it's pretty boutique.
Yeah, well, that is what it is.
For now.
Really great. Thank you, Tanya. Awesome. Okay, well, we'll leave it there today, unless you have any last words that you wanted to share with us.
No, I think that's it.
Great. Thank you. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.